Hi, I'm Jim. Welcome to the Unbound Performance Podcast, where we explore the world of sports and performance mindset training.
And I'm Caroline. Each week we talk about the strategies, habits, and mental framework that help us to excel. Let's get into today's episode.
This morning I went to a meeting with a staff member of this business I work with. But yesterday I go in and every week talk to the whole staff. And so as is the case everywhere, change is a constant. It's usually like big changes.
That's in any group setting, like teams, businesses, families. I mean, that's just always going to be inevitable that one person evolves, everyone else has to adapt, and vice versa.
Yeah, no question.
Got to get on board.
And it's complaining about change is such a waste of time.
Energy.
Absolutely. And it's like complaining about what is reality. There's no escaping change.
This is your current reality.
This is it.
So let's drop up and figure out how to move forward.
Yes, exactly. There's nothing you can do about that. And the only thing that's not changing is the fact that there's going to be change coming every day, all the time. And you can either be prepared and work to anticipate and embrace those changes, or you can become irrelevant, which is a cold way to look at it, I guess, except it's the truth.
It's the truth.
And I don't think we do anybody any favors by trying to coddle them and, make them feel like it's all going to be okay.
Right.
I think instead you want to create resilient people who run toward it. And even if you look at college athletics and the incredible changes that have taken place really fast and furious. And I was talking to a friend of mine. She's a coach at a major Division I program, and her whole approach was one, there's nothing we can do about it. You can either sit around and complain, or, all right, how are we going to make the most of this?
Yeah.
How are we going to make the best of it? How are we going to compete?
What changes do we make to pivot and adapt to continue to be successful in this new environment without letting it totally take us down?
Right. Instead, find a way to use it to help you be better. And there wasn't a hint of venting, complaining, nothing. It was all really forward and aggressive looking and downright inspirational. But yet at the same time, I listen to some people talk about those situations and they want to vent and keep venting. And then tomorrow we'll vent some more. And
it's not productive.
No, it's a waste of time and energy. And what's always interesting too, people will say things like, well, I just need to vent.
Get it off my chest.
Yeah. And then you feel better after that? Not really. And guess what? 3 hours later, you want to vent some more.
I always think of venting, and I mean, it's instinctual
Sure.
to want to do it. I always think of venting as just an outward expression of your internal negative thoughts.
It's good.
Like for me, it's like how to change our thought process. We don't spiral and go down this deep, dark hole. But venting is almost like a version of that, but doesn't provide any solution. There's the practice of, okay, I'm having this thought, it's leading me to a bad place. Okay, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z to catch my thoughts, stop it, reverse it, implement some of those different strategies we talked about last time of rewiring our thoughts and how we think to make ourselves switch the story and how we react to that story. But venting, I feel like, especially if it's to the person in our house, we always vent, and the other person just sits there and listens. We don't venting. Right. Rarely does someone say, "Let me vent," and then tell me what you think. It's just let me get it off my chest, and you shut up and listen.
Yep.
And to me, I think venting can be okay if you vent to be productive, to have a conversation, to come up with a solution. But if it's just venting just to say it and just get the rage out, then it's the same thing as a spiraling negative thought. You're just keeping the conversation going, but from your mouth, not from your head. And I feel like it's just such an unproductive version of how to think about things and solve problems. But if you want to solve the problem, venting isn't productive to come up with a solution.
No, I mean, and that's, look, I'm as guilty as anyone of having done it. The world of education is filled with venters. We just want to keep complaining because we know best, of course. But then we don't actually ever do anything about anything. So, I said yesterday, I wish I had all those hours, weeks, months back where I wasn't helping anyone around me or myself have a more productive, better day. And I think sometimes this happens just because we're not really even aware of what we're thinking and then saying. We just do it. And that's where, when you think about 80% of our thoughts are negative about our circumstances and ourselves. Well, if there's no filter and we're just venting, chances are it's not going to be sunshine and
Well, I always think of people who, like, I think everyone's got them in their life. The person who's always just comes to you to vent their problems, and you want to offer advice, and they just don't take it, and it gets frustrating. It becomes this, like, weird therapy relationship, not a friendship. And I feel like people who tend to just want to vent are the ones who don't know how to critically think, or they're not a natural problem solver. They just spit out the problem, but don't say, okay, here's the issue and here are my thoughts on how I can solve it. It's just, here's the issue and just ruminate on that. And I tend to, if I can really step outside of it, I think the people that just word vomit vent the most aren't always your most creative, thoughtful problem solvers that we know in our lives.
No, I mean, maybe there are natural problem solvers. I'm sure I'm not one of them, but
I'm one of them.
I believe you. I do believe you. And that's where nothing ever gets done with that. And never mind, like, what's the impact of the person that we're venting to? Like, how are we affecting them?
Right.
And
it just perpetuates this sort of victim mentality.
Well, that is it. Like, you wallow in your own sewage, and then you happily share that sewage with someone else.
And then they have to carry it and swim in it.
And then the next day you do it some more. And it's not the way we want to be thinking. We want to be thinking, solve problems, attack mode. Yes. And there are issues, which there always will be. How can we find a way to deal with them? And I know the owners of the business I work with, we've been using the 1 Minute Manager by Ken Blanchard. They have a 1-3-1 thing in there where for every complaint you have three possible solutions.
For it.
And that's the way you turn a problem into an opportunity for growth and to get better. And I don't think many people work that way naturally. I mean, I surely don't. It's taken intentional training of my mind to think better, and I catch it faster. I'm still not above reacting like a human being.
What are some ways that you catch it?
Well, my awareness of my thoughts has...
that's step one. You have to be able to even recognize that you're having a negative thought before you can even implement the mode to catch it and stop it.
And I mean, I do the meditation breath thing, so I return to my breath throughout the day as a way of improving my awareness. Ellen Langer, the psych professor at Harvard, she has a term she uses called actively noticing. The more throughout the day you try to just notice new things, the more then you are aware. It increases your awareness. And I think the more you can improve in that area, then you are going to become a critical thinker. You're not just going to accept whatever's handed to you, whether it's a medical diagnosis or something someone says at work. If your awareness is ramped up, then it becomes, I don't know if that's necessarily true or not. Let me think about that a little more. Let me look into that. Then all of a sudden we become people who are less apt to just mindlessly accept whatever's dumped in our lap. And then also, from a change perspective, when that change is dumped in our lap, we just don't throw our hands up and this stinks and I can't believe this is happening and this isn't fair. And instead we're like, well, shouldn't be surprised by change.
Yeah.
It's going to be some every day probably. Then we can kind of be an agent for affecting our environment instead of just laying back and being a victim, seeing ourselves that way.
Well, there's no sense of advancement there either. If you just are so set in staying in this one way, this is how it's done or this is how it's been. I mean, the number of times I've heard in work situations, in sports situations, in relationships, well, it's always been this way. We are meant to evolve and to grow and to think differently, and to change is really the big word there. And if we're not nimble enough emotionally and mentally to adapt to it, then you get stuck in this miserable place, and then you're going to want to vent and be miserable all the time because everyone else is jumping ahead of you and you're still stuck behind. And that's strain on relationships, it's strain on success, it's strain on promotion, it's just strain on performance.
Yeah, I mean, it's always been this way. That's a lie. That's a myth.
Maybe you think it's always been this way.
Maybe only since you've been paying attention.
Right.
The changes that have occurred, in anything, just in the last 100 years.
I mean, the last 5 years.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. Well, I just think people tie their identity and their safety emotionally, psychologically to I can count on this.
The comfort zone.
Yes, the comfort zone. Nice. I can tell you've thought about this before. And nimble too. I like that word. That was very good.
I didn't have that written down. That
just came to you.
That was good. My vocabulary is so expansive.
See, you're in a flow state. It just comes to you. It's clear. So I think that's where if we view these circumstances as a safety net or something, well, that's a huge mistake.
Yeah.
And that's where if we ever feel confident in our ability to handle whatever comes, we feel prepared, we feel trained. And that's where I think it's incumbent on whoever, if it's in the workplace, you have to have processes in place that keep your people learning and growing and becoming more resilient. If it's an athletic setting, then the same thing. And I remember I was first coaching high school volleyball, and we were in an independent school league that played rules where they were different from the National High School Federation, which the public schools played. So we were going back and forth between the two. Well, in one set of rules, you could block the serve.
Oh.
And in the other, you couldn't. Well, you got to prepare.
Yeah.
Like, that's just like one strange thing. And we could sit around and complain, like, when are they going to get on the same page and have the same rules? Well,
or you can just prepare and decide who we're playing, what rules are they, and let's follow those rules.
And let's be ready. Like, they've got a kid in the middle who's good at blocking serves. Yeah. And then they made all these changes where, like, I mean, it used to be the official had their finger on the net because the ball just even nicked the net in the serve. It was no good. Well, now they have a let serve, and you don't have to do that anymore. Whatever. Set out scoring versus rally scoring. And
I think about it, too, in the fact of if you're aware of your environment, if you're joining a brand new team where none of the players have ever played together before, you're going to have more of the growing pains. We realized this last night, this didn't go well, let's fix it today. We're probably going to have more frequent, as opposed to a more established team who's going to still experience change, but maybe more of a strategic change or more of a forward-looking change. It's not going to come as much of a shock to you. So when I think through like a startup company versus a well-established company, it's going to be, both are going to endure change, but it's maybe the frequency or the reactivity that causes those changes are going to feel different. So before you even step into controlling the change, recognizing the environment that you're in and being able to anticipate what types of changes might come, even just being prepared that change is going to happen. Like, that's a very simple, broad view of it. But if you're prepared that change or struggle is going to happen, your ability to notice it, accept it, and react to it is going to be way different than if you're, for whatever reason, totally blindsided.
Like, technology is one, I mean, it's used everywhere. And, you know, if you're this is how we've always done it kind of person, okay, well, good luck. Like, that's, you know, we have all this new technology that everyone else is using.
Good luck to continuing. Like, maybe you were successful. We've always done it this way, and we've been the best. We've done it this way. But good luck continuing that trend if you don't hop on board with the new things, because maybe the people who are early adopters of that technology are sucking it up right now because they're still learning it. But once it clicks with them, they're going to be light years ahead of you. It's just that ability to catch up and get on board, frankly.
What got you here isn't going to get you there. But the get on board thing, that's the mentality you want to have. One,
let's do this.
Yeah, that's inspiring. It touches other people in the best way. They feel good about jumping in and, all right, let's start swimming. Let's go.
What about the people who are like, oh, like she's drinking the Kool-Aid, like.
Oh, the cynical. Yeah. There was this great, I'm going to paraphrase it, Trevor Moawad in his book, It Takes What It Takes. You know, some people will be like cynical and think they know everything. And all those people are, at the end of the day, are going to be cynical, underachieving.
Anchors to the ground.
Yes. They're not.
Ankle biters.
And it's whatever. The dogs bark, but the caravan rolls on. Yeah. And you can either jump in the wagon and go, or be left behind barking. Plus, it's just not the way you want to live. I think it's easy to be critical of the people who just bark, but hopefully we can put our arm around them. Hey, look, this is what's coming. How can we help you get ready for what's coming so that you can contribute? Like, just be in. If you're in, then we can make the rest work.
I know some people just have a hard time being the person that just jumps on board or like rallies with the team, and they just feel like they've always got to step outside a little bit. It's not even just getting them to say like, okay, I'll be on board with this change, but it's got to be like 3 steps ago in who you are and how you think to be able to do that. You can't just tell someone all of a sudden like, all right, you got to get on board because we're all coming and you need to come, and that person's gonna be like, okay. That cynical trait is usually in you. It's not just in the workplace or not just in the team space. And so it tends to be the people who are overly critical of politics or religion or people, the way people speak or talk or walk or act. They tend to be cynical and critical of everything. And so if that's part of your personality trait, getting someone, let's say it's a teammate who's that way, another teammate going to them and just suddenly being like, stop being that way. It's not good for the team. Well, that person who's being cynical and critical probably needs to do a little bit deeper work on themselves. They most likely can't do that with the team and then stop doing it or continue doing it in other places of their lives. It's got to be a whole person change. Which is hard.
Absolutely, yeah.
But that's why we're talking about the things you can do to make it easier and things you can do to not get in this mode of venting and doing this pointless release that just ruminates endlessly.
You know, we talk about if you're more aware of your thoughts, that's going to be helpful at work. It's going to be helpful at home. It's going to be helpful when you're playing tennis with your pals, you name it. Because then you can, this line of thinking isn't going to help me much. It's not taking me where I want to go. And it doesn't matter if it's, whatever your spouse puts down for dinner that night. I probably shouldn't say what I'm thinking right now. And, when you're going back to serve and when you're playing tennis, and oh my gosh, I just missed my first serve. I got to get this in. Like, that's not how you really want to be thinking either. So the quicker you can
catch that
and kind of reroute, the better. Like, you'll your performance in all of these ways will be improved.
Well, you mentioned at home on the court when you're just out with friends. If you practice it in one area, it will spread to the other areas. Yep. Then that's back to that kind of comment I made of like, if it's in you, it's probably everywhere in all of your spaces in the world. And so if you can practice it in one spot, you're going to notice it carry over in another. And it might be easier to practice it in one area. It might be really hard for you to correct your thoughts on the court, but at home you can bite your tongue when the meal that your spouse puts down sucks and you don't want to say anything. So like the more you practice it in that area, the more comfortable you get with the process. It's not that suddenly you're going to go to the serving line and be able to have that change of thought quick.
Right.
But if you're comfortable with the process of catching the thought, changing the behavior, changing the reaction, that's what you're going to carry over, not the actual comments that you make. So it doesn't matter where you're practicing it. It's an act of changing your brain, and it's going to spread to every scenario that causes you to think negatively.
That's the whole point of training. And then part of it is anticipating like what's apt to maybe trigger an inappropriate line of thinking or commenting. So you can kind of hit it off the pass before it comes out of your mouth. But all of that starts with proved awareness rather than sailing through the day mindlessly, just reacting, and whatever comes out of your mouth comes out of your mouth. And well, that's just who I am. And like, there's no such thing. Yeah. Like if we're all just going to be who we are, guess what? Most of us are going to be jerks and underachieving and uninspiring and comment.
Well, that's the easy route to take. It's easy to be critical. It's easy to complain. It's easy to wallow, but it takes work to
become something else.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, what we've talked about, what's your purpose in the world? What's your purpose in life? There are the people that you meet that are just like constantly just positive. They're always smiling, and sometimes you're like, what? Like, why are you like this? But I feel like if your goal is to be a positive person or to be someone who, brings change or someone who really impacts other people, you have to have that sense of awareness so that you can be that way in those situations. You need to know, okay, my purpose is to do this or to be this way or to share this, with others. And if you aren't aware of the time to be that way or to share that gift that you have, it's not going to come out. It's not always just inherent in you.
Some years ago, I got to talk with Anson Dorrance, who's the soccer coach at UNC, and they have their core values. They print them out. Actually, there's a PDF from 1 year. They have these quotes. First core value is we don't whine. And the quote's by George Bernard Shaw. Said the true joy in life is to be a force of fortune instead of a feverish, selfish little clod of ailments and grievances, complaining that the world will not devote itself to making you happy.
Oh.
That's just a great quote.
The world's not going to make you happy. You can make you happy. So you decide how you think, how you act, how you react.
Yes, that rather than being put upon all the time, you become an agent for your own.
And that's frankly just taking on responsibility for yourself.
Yes. There they make their players memorize all those quotes. It'll be like 7 core values, and they'll have to be able to repeat the quote on command, sometime during the day or whatever. Or else, there's plenty of running, I think, is what happens.
That's why I didn't play soccer.
Yeah, same. Cy Wakeman, she's uses you can drive your BMWs, your bitching, moaning, whining, or you can become a force for good.
Yeah.
And I think that's where you brought up the purpose thing and why are we here. And everywhere you look, there's things to complain about, plenty of people willing to do so. If you become this person who instead is forward looking and trying to help others be their best selves, and you're trying to become your best self, well then that's going to dramatically affect your environment and the people that are in it.
Well, I think venting or wallowing or whatever we're calling it is just this, you're heavily in your emotional state. It's just in order to not do that, frankly, and be productive, it's got to be a balance of your emotions and then that constructive problem solving. And are they off? Are we going to just wallow and vent and let our emotions totally take us over? If you're in this deep wallowing, venting state and you decide that you want to start thinking critically, it makes you feel better. But it's going to bring that balance back in my mind of, okay, what's the solution? Because if we just sit there and be in our emotions, it's going to take us down. But the practice of regulating your emotions, knowing what thoughts to interject with, bring us back to that balance of, okay, sure, it sucks. I don't like it. I feel bad about it, but what am I going to do about it?
Right, and you used the term ruminating before. It's just sitting there boiling in your own juices is so pointless. I mean, we all will feel like doing it. It comes naturally, but it's not how we want to spend our days. Because at the end of them, we don't feel proud of ourselves for doing that or feel good about our impact on others.
No, and I can't really honestly think of a time where I've started out with all right, just let me vent. And then I finished and I felt better.
Right.
Or how many times do I decide, okay, I'm not going to say it out loud, I'll just think it in my head. And at the end of that, I'm in tears or I'm super strong. It doesn't tend to actually help. It just makes it worse. It's going to magnify it.
Yeah, I think sometimes I did feel like, well, that person I just vented to, now they know I've got stuff figured out pretty smart, which is just so gross to even repeat. You talk about being vulnerable right now. That's what I'm doing. When I think about it.
Well, you're often trying to prove a point when you're venting. You're trying to, whether to yourself or to someone else, you're venting, sharing the problem and your strong opinion on it, and you're trying to prove that you're right.
Yeah, my ego gets
Your
involved.
ego gets in the way. Yeah, 100%. And I think that's what limits us from change.
Amen.
Comfort zone.
Yep.
Our ego gets in the way, and we're inflexible. And I think change is scary. We don't know how we're going to adapt to the change. Are we going to succeed in the change? And so your ego gets in the way and says, the way I'm doing it works. I'm not going to mess with it. But what we don't say out loud is because I'm afraid I'm going to fail.
Yeah, and sometimes we think, I bet they haven't thought about that.
Yeah.
Which is...
Yeah, why haven't they thought about this yet?
The ego.
Like, the obvious is, okay, well...
Yeah, ego back in play. It's ugly, really, to me. Like, when I think back about things that I'm embarrassed. Yeah. I wish I was just a much better person than that. Tougher, better. Less arrogant for sure. Yeah. Whatever. But they say, like, if you can't look back and scratch your head at, like, what were you doing? What were you thinking? Well, then you haven't come very far. So
you're probably one of those people that's wallowing in.
Yeah, you're still there. Yeah. So hopefully I'm a more appealing person to be around. But it's weird too, because like when it came to athletics, somehow I didn't usually take that approach. I was always, all right, this what are we going to do? I wish there had been more crossover in some of this other things, but whatever, hindsight being what it is. I mean, the point of this conversation is hopefully we can help people learn from certainly whatever mistakes I'm copying to, which are plenty. Like, no, you don't want to be that way. You don't want to waste years and years with that approach.
Well, you don't want to be that way, and you can make a change in the way that you think, the way that you react, and the way that you are proactive going forward. It's better for you internally. It's in your mind, and I frankly think physically. I mean, you hear these stories about people who get diagnosed with cancer. There's the person who says, "Oh, well, crap, I got cancer," and they just lay in bed. And the person who's like, "I'm going to fight this. I'm going to be strong." I mean, there are plenty of stories where people are like, "I don't know how this person survived, but their mindset was X, Y, and Z, and so here they are, healthy and cancer-free." And I think it's just a matter of believing that you can change, and that's where the ego has to come down. Got to let it down. That okay, I think I was doing it wrong. I want to be better and learn those skills to move forward.
Yes, I think maybe because I felt so unprepared and inadequate, especially for coaching volleyball, that it was easier to realize how much growing and learning I had to do, and it was purpose-driven for sure, but also, I mean, there was some ego involved in that too. Like I didn't want to look like a clown.
But that drove you. I mean,
yes. But I was much more, because, rules changes or whatever. Every year there's new rules. And you can either, I can't believe they did that. Or, all right, these are new rules. What are we going to do? From a coaching standpoint, I was pretty routinely my approach to it. When you look at athletics now, I mean, it's just, the change is staggering from, youth sports and high school sports and club travel type activities. And I've seen where, like, there's going to be NIL money available for high school students, and you can sit there and complain all you want. If you want to still be successful and win games, whatever, and have your teams play well, then
the initial reaction from a lot of people with surrounding NIL was, "Are these kids grateful enough they're getting free college?"
Right. Yep.
And I'll be honest, I was sort of one of those early on, because I was a college athlete who wasn't able to even go play a pickup tournament in the summer and win $20 for win. Like I just couldn't do any of that stuff. But I also see athletes who would typically be a one and done type of player are staying all 4 years. So I also see the benefits of what it does for a program to have consistency in their players and their teams, because these players as seniors can make way more than being a rookie in the NBA or whatever that looks like. And sure, I guess there's not to say that just because they're still at that school that they're working their hardest and doing their best, but I do think it has some positive impact on the program to have players who don't just come 1 foot in, 1 foot out the door. Maybe it's encouraging kids to actually stay and get their degree or have longevity in the team. So, it's definitely positives in my mind.
Well, and I think the process needs some tweaking, but it's not going away.
No, you're not going to turn it off.
So you need to learn how to successfully manage that moving forward, or you're going to be left behind. I remember one of the first articles I read about it was in Sports Illustrated. They were talking about offensive linemen getting deals at Bojangles, and thought that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Talk about, okay, we're way beyond.
Yeah. So far past that now.
Deals for offensive linemen eating
Bojangles.
Biscuits. Like, it's not even close.
Yeah.
We're talking millions of dollars in some cases. And how do you manage all that? What effect does that have on your team and the culture? And not everybody's going to get millions of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars. How do you still move together forward?
Right. How do teammates who have no deals be a good, positive teammate to the one who's got millions of dollars?
I remember one college volleyball player, she got a $1 million deal. She wound up not even being a starter. What impact did that have on that team? But it seemed like that it was handled really well by everybody that was involved. And it's just become something else that's part of the equation that you have to manage if you're a coach or any kind of administrator or leader.
And there's going to be more things that come up like that.
But that goes back to where we first started. That's the nature of it. There's always going to be something new. And I remember being shown around a football training table by a strength and conditioning coach when he was explaining to me how it used to be like if we had cream cheese out here with the bagels, then it was considered a meal and we couldn't do it.
Oh, God.
Couldn't provide it, but if it was just plain bagels with no cream cheese, then it didn't count. So, there's always been kind of crazy stuff you have to keep up with.
Yeah.
Now the dollar bills are bigger. So either you can sit there and complain or you can kind of flip the switch and full steam ahead. Let's go.
Yeah.
I recommend the latter.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Unbound Performance Podcast.
Your support helps us continue to build our community. If you're enjoying this content, please like, subscribe, and share.